Now we're ready to set up our user preference settings for the MyPad World app for the iPad. To save and read preference settings, we use a built-in, easy-to-use class that lets you read and set user preferences from your app. It's called NSUserDefaults. We are using NSUserDefaults to read and store preference data to a default database using a key value, just as you would access keyed data from an NS dictionary. And as you can see, with an NS dictionary, you have a count method for the number of entries, an object for key to get the value for a given key, and others such as write to file anatomically and init with contents of file, which we're not going to be using. But the difference between NSUserDefaults and an NS dictionary is that NSUserDefaults data is stored in the file system rather than in an object in memory. Objects, after all, go away when the app terminates. Storing the data in the file system rather than in memory gives you an easy way to store application-specific information. With the help of NSUserDefaults, we can easily store the state the user was in when he or she quit the app, or store something simple like a text string, which is what we're going to be doing, as well as the speed setting. It's really easy to both access and update a preference if you use NSUserDefaults. The trick is that you use the class to read and update the replacement text and speed. And you can use the setObjectForKey method to add entries and the removeObjectForKey method to remove entries. NSUserDefaults is a class that's implemented as a singleton, meaning there's only one instance of NSUserDefaults running in your app. To get access to that one instance, you invoke the class method standarduserdefaults, as in NSUserDefaults, standarduserdefaults, as you can see in our first line of the if statement here. Standarduserdefaults returns the NSUserDefaults object. As soon as you have access to the standarduserdefaults, you can store data there and then get it back when you need it. To store data, you simply give it a key and tell it to save the data using that key. And the way you tell it to save something is by using the setObjectForKey method. As you can see at the bottom here, we set object peace on earth for the key K words of wisdom. The first object, setObject, is the object you want NSUserDefaults to save. This object must be NSData, NSString, NSNumber, NSDate, NSArray, or NSDictionary. In this case, the saved data is an NSString, so we're in good shape. The second argument is for key. In order to get the data back, and in order for NSUserDefaults to know where to save it, you have to be able to identify it to NSUserDefaults. You can, after all, have a number of preferences stored in the NSUserDefaults database, and the key tells NSUserDefaults which one you're interested in. And the keys we are using are K words of wisdom for the following words replacement text, K speed for the animation speed, and we're also using K max speed for the maximum speed possible. And we've already added them to our constants.h file. So now we can read these preferences into the app. To use the preference settings for the app's view, we have to link it up with the view controller, in this case, MyPad World View Controller. The best place to do that is the viewDidLoad method. Now here we are at MyPad World View Controller and its implementation file. And we're going to open up the view utility pane on the right here in case we want to show any help for any of these things. And we can jump directly to the viewDidLoad method here because we put in our pragma mark statements. Here it is. Let's scroll that down a little bit and click in it. As you can see, quick help immediately appears. This is called after the controller's view is loaded into memory. viewDidLoad is invoked right after the view has been loaded from the nib file into memory. And so now what we want to do is we want to write code that checks to see whether K words of wisdom setting has been moved into NSUserDefaults. Because if that happened, that means the following text in K words of wisdom has been changed. And the place to do that is right below here, our timer. Now, it's interesting to note that we have already put in constant values for falling words and speed. What we want to do now is we want to comment them out. So we add 2 slashes and turn both of those statements into comments. Now, what we want to do here is we want to write a conditional. If, and our condition is to retrieve from NSUserDefaults, the standard user defaults. First, we connect to the object, and then the object for key is K words of wisdom. If that has been transferred into standard user defaults, then our statement is NS user defaults, standard user defaults. We again connect to the object, and we use the set object method to set it to peace on earth for the key K words of wisdom. So in other words, if the settings haven't been moved yet into the standard user defaults, if K words of wisdom hasn't been changed, the code uses the initial preference value, peace on earth, and assigns that to K words of wisdom as the preference. We also assign it to falling words. Now, we notice that right away we have an error, an undeclared identifier, but yet I thought we had declared that. And we realize that what we haven't done yet, and we should, is go right up to the top of the implementation file, and we need to import the constants.h file. That's why it can't find it. This is one of the reasons why the code completion and the built-in debugging feature of Xcode really can help you save time. So we add constants.h here, and we go back down, and look, there are no more warnings. So that's what happens if the settings haven't been changed, but what if they have? Else. Well, then else we put in some statements to handle the condition that the settings have been moved. So if the settings have been moved into NS user defaults, the code now is going to read them and set falling words to whatever the user preference really is. So we type falling words, and we call up the object again with standard user defaults, and the string for key is K words of wisdom. And so that has given us the ability to test to see if the user preferences have changed. Now remember, the code moves the user preferences into NS user defaults only after the app runs for the first time. However, if you decide to make user preferences settings available in the settings app, settings will update preferences in NS user defaults if the user makes any changes. So basically, if the settings have not been moved into NS user defaults yet, the code uses the initial preference value of peace on earth for falling words. And if the settings have been moved into NS user defaults, the code reads them in and sets falling words to the new user preference in K words of wisdom. Now we're going to repeat the same check with the speed setting. So we want to do an if condition, and it's again accessing NS user defaults, standard user defaults, with the object for key K speed. And then the statements will access NS user defaults with standard user defaults, set double 10.0 for key K speed. So just like we did with the text, we're doing the same thing with the speed. If it hasn't changed, we're going to set the speed preference to 10. And while we're at it, we're going to set the speed itself equal to K max speed minus whatever is in NS user defaults, standard user defaults, double for key K speed. So now we've essentially made speed always the maximum speed minus whatever the default preferences have been set. And of course, we also have to set speed itself to be K max speed minus 10.0. That's in case we wanted to have a much greater K max speed in the future. So we've handled the situation if the speed hasn't changed, if K speed hasn't changed. But if it has, else, we have a statement here that we want speed equals K max speed minus, we pull out the standard user default from the user defaults object and set the double for key to K speed. And now we have put in the preferences that we need into the view controller for the main view. And now that we've done that, we're all set to move on to getting started with the modal view.